The Russia-Ukraine War, a conflict that began with Russia's incursion into Ukrainian territory in 2022, has now stretched into its third year. The upcoming winter season, with all its harsh conditions, looms as a potential turning point in this ongoing struggle, as recent reports suggest that Russia is gearing up for a significant offensive. This winter assault could be a bid to secure key territorial gains before U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, known for his skepticism about American support for Ukraine, takes office. Trump has suggested that he could end the conflict swiftly, an assertion that has left the world watching closely to see how U.S.-Russia relations may change under his administration. The situation is dire for Ukraine, which has faced mounting challenges in maintaining its defensive lines. Reports from the front lines indicate that Russian forces have been preparing for this offensive for weeks, amassing troops, armored vehicles, and aerial capabilities in key regions. In response, Ukrainian soldiers have fortified their positions along the southern front, especially around Zaporizhzhia, where they expect some of the heaviest fighting. Ukrainian military officials warn that the coming winter could bring one of the most intense phases of the war, as both sides seek to gain strategic advantages before the change in U.S. leadership potentially reshapes the balance of power. Strategic movements in the southern front, Zaporizhzhia as a focal point. The Zaporizhzhia region, a key strategic area on Ukraine's southern front, has become a focal point in recent weeks. Ukrainian intelligence suggests that Russian forces have concentrated large numbers of infantry, armored vehicles, and aerial units there. Russian troops appear poised to push deeper into Ukrainian territory, hoping to secure a clear path to the Black Sea and assert dominance over southern Ukraine. Zaporizhzhia's significance lies in its proximity to the southern coast and its role as a gateway to other critical regions. Control of this area would provide Russia with easier access to other parts of Ukraine's industrial heartland, as well as potential control over ports and infrastructure critical to Ukraine's economy. The Ukrainian military is aware of these stakes and has responded by bolstering defenses, installing anti-tank barriers, and fortifying artillery positions in anticipation of a potential Russian assault. Still, Ukrainian commanders are under no illusions. Should Russia initiate a full-scale winter offensive, Ukraine's defensive lines, already stretched thin by months of fighting, will face an unprecedented challenge. Russian advances in the east. The situation in Donetsk. While Russia has made progress in the south, it is in the eastern region of Donetsk that the most significant recent gains have occurred. On November 10th, reports emerged that Russian forces had captured another village in Donetsk, marking a key victory in a region that has been a central battleground since the war began. The Russian offensive in Donetsk appears calculated, targeting not only military outposts but also essential supply hubs that keep Ukrainian defenses supplied with ammunition, food, and medical aid. One such hub, the strategic city of Pokrovsk, is under increasing threat as Russian forces push forward. The significance of Pokrovsk cannot be understated. Serving as a logistical center, it is vital for maintaining the flow of supplies and reinforcements to Ukraine's eastern front lines. Should Russia successfully capture Pokrovsk, it would disrupt Ukraine's entire supply network in the east, forcing Ukrainian forces to retreat to less fortified positions. To gain control of these regions, Russian forces have concentrated their efforts, employing both ground troops and a barrage of artillery and airstrikes that have pummeled Ukrainian positions. Ukrainian forces, however, remain resolute, defending key locations with a determination fueled by months of resistance against overwhelming odds. The tactical landscape, Russia's encirclement strategy, and Ukraine's response. One of the primary strategies employed by Russian forces in Donetsk is a multi-pronged attack that seeks to encircle Ukrainian positions. Reports from Ukrainian military personnel indicate that Russian troops are advancing from three sides, with the aim of isolating Ukrainian forces and cutting off escape routes. Encirclement tactics have been a recurring feature of Russian strategy throughout the conflict, designed to force Ukrainian troops into untenable positions where they are either forced to surrender or face heavy casualties. This method has proven effective in the past, as it limits Ukraine's ability to reinforce or resupply isolated units. Ukraine's response has been to fortify its defensive lines in anticipation of this strategy, placing special emphasis on maintaining open supply routes. However, these defensive positions have come at a high cost. Ukrainian forces are already stretched thin, with manpower shortages becoming a critical issue as the war drags on. To compensate, Ukrainian officials have redeployed personnel from non-combat roles, such as Air Force pilots, engineers, and medics, to frontline positions. Despite these reinforcements, Ukraine's ability to resist encirclement will depend on the continued resilience of its troops and the availability of resources, which are dwindling with each passing month. Kyiv under threat, the impact of Russian airstrikes. On the morning of November 15th, Kyiv faced its first major missile strike in over 2 months. The attack, which included a mix of cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and drones, was aimed at both military and civilian infrastructure, with a specific focus on Kyiv's energy grid. This strike, the latest in a series of attacks on Ukraine's critical infrastructure, underscores Russia's strategy to weaken Ukraine's ability to sustain its population and military operations as winter approaches. The choice to target Kyiv's energy infrastructure is part of a calculated move by Russia to exacerbate the hardships of winter for the civilian population. Without power, Kyiv residents are forced to endure freezing temperatures with limited heating, and power outages are becoming a regular occurrence. Ukrainian officials have warned that the energy grid is already operating at reduced capacity, and additional strikes could plunge large parts of the country into darkness. This tactic is likely intended to demoralize the Ukrainian population, as civilian suffering often impacts public support for prolonged conflicts. The missile strike on Kyiv has also intensified calls from Ukrainian officials for increased Western support, particularly in the form of advanced air defense systems. Although Ukraine's current defenses managed to intercept several of the incoming missiles and drones, the sheer volume of attacks is straining the system. Western nations, including the United States and members of the European Union, have provided substantial military aid to Ukraine, but Ukrainian leaders are now appealing for more sophisticated air defense capabilities to protect both military and civilian targets. The international dimension, U.S. support, and the implications of Trump's victory. The recent U.S. election results have added a new layer of complexity to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. President-elect Donald Trump, who will assume office in January, has repeatedly expressed his intention to reduce American involvement in foreign conflicts, including Ukraine. Trump has argued that the U.S. should prioritize domestic issues and has criticized the scale of military aid sent to Ukraine. His campaign statements have raised concerns in Ukraine and among Western allies who fear that a reduction in U.S. support could severely impact Ukraine's ability to resist Russian advances. The United States has been Ukraine's most significant ally since the war began, providing billions of dollars in military aid and crucial intelligence support. U.S. weapons, including HIMARS rocket systems and advanced anti-aircraft systems, have played a decisive role in enabling Ukraine to hold back Russian advances. A reduction in U.S. support, therefore, would not only impact Ukraine's ability to defend itself, but could also embolden Russia to push for further territorial gains, knowing that Ukraine's defenses may soon be weakened. For Ukraine, Trump's victory represents an uncertain future. Without U.S. support, Ukraine's ability to sustain its war efforts will depend heavily on European allies. However, European nations face their own challenges, including economic pressures and public fatigue over prolonged military support. If Trump's administration decides to scale back American involvement, Ukraine may find itself increasingly reliant on European assistance, which may not be sufficient to maintain the current level of defense. Civilian hardships, life under siege in Ukraine. As the conflict escalates, the toll on Ukraine's civilian population continues to mount. For residents of Kyiv and other major cities, life has become a constant struggle to survive amid missile strikes, power outages, and the threat of further escalation. Many families have sought refuge in underground shelters, including metro stations, where they endure freezing temperatures and limited supplies. For children, school closures and the trauma of war have become part of their daily lives, as air raid sirens and explosions have replaced the routines of normal childhood. In smaller towns and villages, particularly those in the eastern Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia regions, the situation is even more dire. Communities that once thrived are now reduced to rubble, with residents left to fend for themselves amid the devastation. Access to medical care is limited, as hospitals and clinics have been damaged or destroyed, and medical supplies are in short supply. Humanitarian organizations are doing what they can, but the scale of the crisis has stretched resources to their limit. The potential for a peace deal may ultimately depend on international mediation, particularly from the United States and European powers. However, With Trump set to take office and signaling a reluctance to engage in prolonged foreign interventions, the likelihood of a brokered peace agreement remains uncertain. For now, both Russia and Ukraine appear committed to pursuing their respective military objectives, even as the human cost continues to rise. The coming months will be critical, as the winter season and the impending change in U.S. leadership could bring significant shifts in the conflict. Whether peace will come through negotiation or be forced by military realities, one thing is clear. Ukraine and its people face a harsh winter ahead, with the outcome of the war hanging in the balance.